guest is a transformational NLP life coach, writer, speaker, and author of Becoming Ridiculously Awesome. Who doesn't want that? She is an experienced NLP coach who helps you get to the root cause of what stops you from experiencing the life you want through her multifaceted experience and training. She has a master practitioner certification from NLP Marin, a Family Soul Constellation facilitator certification, and was initiated into Huna by Kahuna Mark Saito in Hawaii. She studied Huna with him for over a span of 3 years. Let's welcome today's guest, Meredith Herrenbruck. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, as we proceed through these times, many people have been experiencing an awakening, have grown into fear, into a deeper place of fear, or maybe a combination of both. And some of the work that you've been doing or have studied helps people find the root causes of what really takes place or what's going on. And maybe you could just share a little bit about your background and some of the things that I mentioned in the bio, but maybe you could elaborate on those.
Absolutely. Well, to address your question, yes, there's a lot of fear in the world right now. That is really it's the new example of what we are, all the fears that we already have in our bodies. Because if we're in a more solid place, more self-confident, more self-aware, then those triggers and those fears won't come up quite in the same flavor or as intensely. And even if you have a level of consciousness like Christ or Buddha, I'm sure even then, there are the body's fears, there's the body's reactions and the histories, but they were masters, in my opinion, and what I've learned is that they were masters of their craft, if you will. They knew who they were, they knew what they were, they knew how everything operated. And we have yet to get there ourselves, but life's a journey. And so my journey started when I was little and had premonitions. I had a trauma when I was little and had to deal with that over a span of many years because I wasn't getting the comfort, the support, or the help that I needed. And so my experience for many years was, goodness, lots of tapes playing in my head, nightmares, a lot of stress in my body, a lot of lack of confidence. I mean, you kind of name it, it was all there. And, but then I ended up talking with a friend of mine about boy troubles, and he started asking me these questions that were they just drilled to the heart of it. And not just the heart of the problem, but the heart of how I was creating my experience. And that's the main difference of those who learn to master a craft, whether it's owning a business or being able to get out of your depression or getting out of bed, is it all starts with you, and you have to find accountability and find your part in yourself and the world, how you behave, how you think, how you act, and that it starts and ends with you.
Right.
And through NLP and Huna and Family Soul Constellations, it starts and ends with you. But the pain is held on various layers that we're not really taught growing up, or really in the Western side of things. And when I came across these, it was just light bulbs. It was ding, 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 ding. And it was a resounding truth that I'm sure when you kind of hit that experience where you go, this is it, and it may not be it forever. There are some truths that are like, I need to hit this for now. And then you plateau into new planes. But there are certain truths where you just go, that's it. And your whole body knows, and it remembers. And so I've learned to, when I feel that, go with it and just follow it, because it's always taken me to amazing places.
Yeah, it's interesting because so much of our lives are spent in trying to forget the past and trying to cover it up, in terms of us thinking that if we cover it up, we grow up and we leave the past behind. And there's those stages of our lives where we, I guess, diminish the parts of ourselves we don't like. And then I guess through these works and through, maturity, we wind up realizing that we have to head back in the journey we left behind in order to connect the past with the present. So how does neurolinguistic training, or how does that specifically get to the core of it, or what is it? What do you exactly do?
Well, first off, when we're working with a client, um, we get into rapport with the person we're working with. And it's really important to build rapport to allow their system to feel safe and to be in a calm, safe environment such that they can go to places that are really scary or really sad and heartbreaking, because it's hard work to be
Right.
able to sit with it. And we're taught, and I catch myself doing this with my children, of suck it up, deal with it, go somewhere else. And so we're not trained to integrate and to move through things. We're starting to with more positive parenting and so forth in these generations, which I think is fantastic. And I'm learning more and more how to do that specifically with each child. But how NLP works with someone is we start with rapport, making sure they feel safe as best as we can. And then we start asking questions on the desired state. What would you like? And I remember the first time I was asked that in the classes, I instantly resisted the whole question. And I mean, I mentally threw up all these things in my head. Why are you asking that? Why do you want to know? Right? And we have all these resistances. And so then when you ask, what would you like, is you're trying to create and understand what the future is that you would like. And then we go, that's wonderful. Why don't you have it now? Because, you're a person who's pretty smart and you probably have a roof over your head and have enough to pay the bills and so forth, that you've got a lot of things figured out. But how do you not have this figured out quite yet? And the reason why is because we have created all these roadblocks ever since we were little and even before, that it starts with really the phrase, what you survive, you recreate. And so when we're growing up, we experience something. And so say we're 2 years old and we've learned a little bit on how to deal with things. And so we go, all right, well, I think I know how to do this, or I'm going to try this answer out. And when it works out, then we go, great, I'm going to file it away. So then when I see something similar, I experience something similar, I know how to do it. I'm going to apply that again. And if that response is good enough, you're going to keep employing it ad nauseum until you die, and perhaps even beyond. So the thing is, we don't update that system. And so it worked what was when we were 3 years old. Well, might not apply really to age 10 or 20, or in relationships, or getting a job, keeping a job, et cetera, et cetera. And so what happens is we build up these new, or we experience this filter of this job well done when we are 3. And so, but the thing also is, what we survive, we recreate is, well, if it worked, I want to feel successful. So I'm going to keep that sort of situation around me so I can keep surviving it.
Right.
And then your body every time goes, yes, I did it. I survived. This is awesome. But what if it's not just how to open an aluminum can, but it's how do I survive an alcoholic parent? How do I survive a trauma? How do I survive PTSD? All these things, we keep them around us. And we don't know, we haven't been trained to learn how to move through it with rapport, with honor and respect. And when you're talking about, we often shove that energy away, all that history away, it only perpetuates it. and it doesn't honor that you're doing the best you can. And so now we have self-judgments. Now we're managing all these triggers, all these old things. We're self-sabotaging
Right.
before we get to our desired state. So we're always reaching, but never achieving. And so then we sit on the couch, depressed, frustrated, and not knowing what the heck is going on.
Yeah. It's interesting because as we speak, we all have a story and we're all comfortable telling the same story and playing the role or the part of that character in order to keep us either as a victim or as the hero in many cases. And
Yes.
there's no in between sometimes, because in between means that, I guess, the walls shatter and then you reinvent yourself. And so many times it's not just, I think, the personal relationship you have with yourself, but it's also, it shows itself in the external world with friends and family, of how many times people try to expose themselves with who they really are, or what they want to express, and then they're shunned or they're abandoned. And that's probably, I would say, probably the biggest fear. What would you think about that?
I absolutely agree. And I often say that's why I think societies move really slowly, is because people think that if they think outside the box, like in entrepreneurial realms, you want to think outside the box, right? You want to be different. You want to find that new thing, the better thing. But if we have a new idea in a social structure, whether it's in work or in our temples or in our family structures, if we are too dissimilar to those around us, it challenges their choices, challenges their beliefs, and then they go, well, that makes me uncomfortable and I don't like that. And so then I'm going to manipulate or say something so you don't make that change, because then I don't want to change. I don't want to look at myself. I don't want to lose what's already comfortable. And so then that person who is wanting to change because it's just not feeling right for them, we also put the judgments of, I don't want my parents to feel uncomfortable. I don't want them to feel badly. And so we place guilt, we self-sabotage to keep us in the fold. Because also some people, and I've seen this many times, of if you marry outside of your religion, it doesn't necessarily matter what religion it is, it happens all over. But if you marry outside of your religion, you'll be excommunicated. You know, the grandparents will not see the grandchildren. They will not hang out for whatever holidays they are, and you are done. You are cast out. And that is very scary to a lot of people, because this is where we were comforted. This is where we grew up and had all that nurturing and that guidance. So that can be a very scary place and uncomfortable, because of course we love our families as in all the ways we do. So that is why often we don't want to change too much, or we fear looking at it at all. And the other thing too is there's a fear of, well, what if I don't recognize myself after this? Who will I be? And the identity crisis, like just the fear of it, not at the actual process. You'll stop yourself in the tracks because you can't see to the other side. And so that's why we stop ourselves a lot. But I want to tell you that, I mean, and I face that very much myself.
Right.
I was doing a lot of work on who was I? How did the world work? And then I go, well, and I remember I was lying in meditation at this gentleman's, we were doing a retreat, and his name is Babaji, and he lives in Sonoma, California. Great man. And he lived total life like a Westerner for many, many years. And then he goes, but I'm not happy. So then he shifted his job. But he helped me, he goes, just keep going, just keep asking the questions. And I kept asking the questions. Well, if I'm not my fingernail, right? And I kept mentally chopping off body parts. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm still me. And then I got to the heart and the mind. And I go, well, and I finally realized, and I was hyperventilating practically, and I would go, well, if I'm not my toes and all these other body parts and all these cells, then logically, why would the heart and mind be any different? Or I should say brain, because that's a tangible object. And I got sucked through this wormhole. I don't know how, just like in my mind, I just got sucked into this new place. And I had this enlightened experience, this epiphany of like, oh my goodness. And I was still here. I was still experiencing. I was still seeing and having all my senses, but I saw the world extremely differently. And it's not to say that you don't still feel pain and you don't have the daily frustrations. But what I want to say mainly is that no matter how your journey is, you're still going to be you at the end of it. You're just going to slough off all the old layers of belief systems that have stopped you from being your shiny, beautiful, amazing whole self. We live our lives so much for other people, to not get harmed here, to not make waves over here. And we're not living in our truth. And so the more we do that, the more fear builds up, the more, well, hell breaks loose in the universe. And as we're seeing right now, across the pond over in Europe. So if you have fears, unattended fears will create chronic conditions. Lackluster, beautiful, amazing, close relationships with people, and so although it's comforting, it's also kind of shackles as well. So what side do you want to be on is really the question.
Yeah, it's interesting. Which leads me to the subject of, in terms of, we obviously have interactions with our immediate family, and we become the storytellers of that particular story, as I said before. But there are also stories that are told, and energies that are passed on from one generation to the next, which brings us to the subject of family constellations and how that impacts a person in terms of their development, or in terms of what reveals their darkness, or holds them back from becoming whole. Maybe you could elaborate on family constellations and what you do and what it is and how that impacts.
So family constellations allows a person to be able to see and understand what unresolved issues have been carried down through the generations. Meaning, this is very prevalent all over the place, is alcoholism. If a grandparent was alcoholic, then the next generation or a generation down will grab onto that energy. And alcoholism, as a side note, is an addiction, but it's an addiction because there is a fear or a loss or something that they are trying to compensate for. But alcoholism is a very easy addiction to have. And so, it numbs the body, and so forth. It changes our chemistry to make us feel better, to kind of numb ourselves. So if you have a grandparent who was alcoholic, you go, well, what were they sad about? What was the energy behind that? A lot of people look at the behaviors as being the problem, but I look behind that on what are the feelings? What is behind that is causing the actions? And so then we look down and we go, well, why were they an alcoholic? And then we look, and so I'll ask the clients, well, do you know anything about your family history? Was there immigration? Were there divorces, property loss, money loss, wars, famines? I mean, anything that was big, miscarriages, any, issues with birth. And what happens is when those energies get stuck, they get stuck such that the person who had that experience has not resolved it within themselves and made peace with it. And so then it gets whole, almost like a pearl. It gets held tightly and passed down the generations until, but it's hidden, especially with childbirth and things like that. There are a lot of things that you did not speak about, and you sweep it under the rug and, no, we are a perfect family. We have to present to society as being this perfect, well-to-do, well put together, etc. But it creates cracks. Right. And so anyway, the generations down will grab onto it in effort to say, I love you, and to fix the situation. And point to it and say, family, this is a problem. We need to acknowledge this. People need to not be in their victim state. We need to somehow make this whole and let that energy go through and resolve it and acknowledge it and make our peace with it. And so when the younger generations grab onto it, they don't make it better. They make their lives worse. And they will do things in a way such that everyone around them will go, you grew up in a great childhood, like honestly, like great families, but what the heck is going on?
Right.
And so it's, when you hear people are the black sheep of the family, often black sheep are those who are trying to point to the problem, but they don't know what it is. So Family Soul Constellations is a way to find out what it is and offer a resolution. And when you offer a resolution, it's different. Every situation is different, but there have been patterns that have been discovered over many constellations that work. And so it's so hard to describe, but when everything is in alignment and the energies are supported and everyone is kind of standing in their truth and everyone's kind of beaming and feeling okay, then almost in real time, chronic conditions can go away. They have gone away. Nightmares go away. Bad feelings go away. Relationships are improved. For example, I did a constellation a few weeks ago about two sisters who, well, the one sister always had issues with her older sister. And ever since they were little, and it was just like, what is going on? My older sister is always on me, always kind of instigating things and always telling me what to do, and not just being a fun, loving sister. And they never had a good time together. So I did a constellation and they were hanging out 5 days later. And she texted me the next day and she goes, it has to be the constellation. And this woman is in her 20s. And she goes, it has to be a constellation because we hung out on Saturday night. We had the best time together. We were just hanging out, having a great time, no needling, no frustration. It was just fun. And she goes, I am so grateful to this constellation because now our relationship is changed.
Yeah, okay. So it's like bringing the unconscious to the conscious, the behaviors and patterns that have been probably suppressed and hidden. It's interesting.
Yes.
I for one had a grandfather. I might have said this to you once. He was a World War II soldier, and my father denied his presence, and because of that, I kind of felt, I guess you can call it like the black sheep of the family, trying to point towards that energy that was gnawing at me. And probably every February or so, I'd get a chest cold. And I would, and then eventually, as I uncovered it through my grandmother's diaries, I found that he died in February, and it was in World War II in the cold, frozen terrain. And somehow it was like almost poking at me to be recognized, but also to maybe change the patterns of what was going on in the family that needed to be validated or recognized. And somehow or another, I found that poignant, and I found it to be on point for something for myself.
Absolutely. And well done, and often just shining a light on it and just kind of divine witnessing it will dissipate it and let it go. It just needs to be seen and acknowledged. Often just doing that does amazing, amazing amount of healing.
Yeah. I guess past lives play a role as well in terms of us uncovering different tragedies or
They
different setbacks. And
Yes, they do, because even our current lives can be even replays of the previous ones. Whatever is stuck,
yes,
you'll repeat. You're operating at a certain vibration, a certain belief system or series of belief systems, and you'll just keep hitting that vibration until you get tired of it. And you just go, all right, what do I need to shift within myself to shift whatever this experience is? And so again, when you're talking about victim versus, I guess, standing in your truth, and acknowledging that we have that power within ourselves to direct where we're going and how we are doing it, that when you can stand and acknowledge that you are where you are and that the world is not trying to screw you over, that it is just reflecting your energy back to you, your belief systems, your actions. And then when you start to kind of get it, the synchronicities will start happening. And then you'll go, wait a minute, no, this, and then you'll go, no, it can't be, no, it's the world is chaos. I'm fighting against the machine. But the machine is always reflecting back to you what you're projecting. So when you start to understand that, then the magic starts to happen. Then it can actually be fun. It'll be a little rough for a while because you're shifting and other people might not want to necessarily shift with you.
right.
And that's okay. And, but then once you start to get the hang of it, then you go, well, cool. If I don't have to have this negative experience, maybe I don't have to. And then I can, so whenever I'm coming up against something, I always go, what am I believing about myself? Where did it come from? What memories do I have? Right. And I'll kind of flush it out and then I'll go, well, can I let that go? And so I've refined my experience a lot more. Sometimes I still need a session once in a while. Go, okay, what am I hiding from myself? What am I not seeing? Right? Because it's so comfortable. We won't see those things. So, but getting back into the past lives is this current life is probably a very similar vibration and experience of the last one. So you are bringing your past lives in. And if you have recurring nightmares or addictions, maybe it's from past life trauma. I keep hearing from various places that birthmarks often are, how do you say, residue from a past life trauma on how you died. Right.
Yeah.
And it seems to be pretty accurate. Like the stork bite, which is a, kind of a red shape at the base of the skull. I wonder if that actually is maybe a decapitation. I just started thinking this the other day. I'm like, is it a gunshot or maybe because it's very central here?
Right,
And
right.
like, how often do you really, if you use not to get gory, but if you have a gun, it doesn't really make sense. So I'm curious, like, well, what do these birthmarks tend to mean as far as their placement? And so I think doing past life work is really, really powerful and can teach you a lot about yourself and where you've come from. If you love, having fish tanks, maybe you lived by the ocean and had a wonderful life there. If you loved horses, maybe you were a, horseback rider, or something like that. Speaking of which, I did some soul work, soul fragment work, a long time ago with this wonderful woman in San Francisco. And I had 3 sessions with her. And there was an accident I had in this life in high school where I was on a horse And I was, horseback riding with a friend of mine, and her horse never kicks. It's like the mellowest horse and everything else. And it kicked out this afternoon, and it hit just beneath my knee. And I will tell you, that was some of the greatest pain I've ever experienced. And I was in absolute pain for about 4 hours, and nothing shattered, thank goodness. But, it was extremely painful. And so one of the things I worked on with this woman was, this experience. And she says, well, it was basically a karmic debt that you had to pay. That I forget exactly what it was, but it was I had not been kind to horses, basically. And which is crazy because I love horses in this lifetime, they're amazing. But I apparently did the horses wrong. And so it was basically payback. So you kind of, when you hear these things and then when she said it, it rang true. And I go, that makes sense. Like, why would this horse in that moment, in just that perfect way, why would I have that experience?
Right.
So then you start looking, when you start learning those things, you start questioning, well, why do I experience all the things that I do throughout the day? Those accidents, those synchronicities, so the more you look, the less you believe that life is chaos at all. Right?
One random act of joining the past with the present. It's interesting. I had interviewed someone a couple of weeks ago, and they've expressed their past lives, and it was evident, the information. And I've had past life, I guess readings, but more so I've do healing work, and I was working on people, and all of a sudden they'd pop up from the healing, and they would say something, and all would be in the same genre of who I was and where I was at. So I was a doctor in the concentration camps, and recently, this is like 3-4 people telling me the same thing. I know who you are. I know who you are. And then recently, I had a woman contact me who said to me specifically, she said, please email me, because it was through the interview that these people knew someone that, I don't know, she expressed her past life to them, and then it tied in together that I evidently took her off the line in terms of helping her survive.
Wow.
And she recognized, I don't know what she recognized, but she contacted me. She says, you're the person who took me off. And that was in line with somebody else told me last year when I was doing energy work. They popped off the chair and they said, I recognize you. And so for me, I'm living now those past life memories, feeling paranoid, feeling fear of doctors, feeling all the things that I was in charge of, or maybe in more control. And now I'm the victim of that, or feeling like the victim of that.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So it's been and my whole life has been centered actually around that. Like I spoke German fluently within 5 months, and I come from a Jewish mother and a Russian father, a mix. So it was, very interesting for me. And the reason I bring that up is because it's so profound for me to understand, like, why am I feeling that? And as you bring up family constellations and speaking about that specific subject, I mean, people usually go on a certain journey to find their way of these different modalities. They're going to first want to uncover what they personally, I assume, went through. And then as they proceed, they're going to then say, what else impacted me other than my personal family or experiences? Which brings us to the family constellations, as you just mentioned. And then you have the Huna, which is the third part of what you do, which ties into the healing aspect of it, I assume. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
Absolutely. All the modalities that I use, I think, are very complementary and help a person heal fairly completely, because NLP works with the neural pathways, the traumas, the healing, and creating new neural pathways such that you don't have to be triggered anymore, that you can honor the experience and not be in that fight or flight all the time, not managing your past experience and keeping it so close. And again, my experience was, I mean, my trauma was all day, every day. It really colored absolutely everything. And when I did enough sessions, I don't even think about it anymore. I mean, it's not part of my experience anymore. And it is something now in the past. And it's just amazing that, you know, there's so many people with PTSD that it can be turned off actually very quickly, you know, with probably 2-3 sessions for the most part. And then your brain will not have to manage and goes, oh, it's okay over here too. I can still be me, but not have to have that experience so close. And then eventually, you know, as neural pathways do, when you don't use a pathway, it will just kind of erase it and it'll fill with new information. And so so my experience has been that, you know, you don't have to live with PTSD. You don't have to take pills for it at all. And so the NLP deals with the more neurological aspects, and then the family constellations is the family energies. What are you holding on to? And then the Huna is dealing more with the past life regressions, soul fragments, entity or ghost attachments that are either in your home or attached to an object or your person. And that even includes hexes and curses and anything. It's like all those energies, like little dust bunnies, even though we can't see them, they do hold weight. I was reading recently, like there is actually a magnetism to them. So when you're vibrating at a certain vibration,
Right.
and other things are vibrating at that as well, then you kind of connect. And so I'm constantly clearing myself. You know, when I start to feel a little off and I know I'm eating well enough and I'm exercising and, you know, doing all the normal daily things that we're quote supposed to do, but it's just, I don't know why, but I'm feeling tired or I'm extra angry today, you know, or I have voices in my head. Let me tell you a crazy story. And I have lots of crazy cool stories, but this one was, I remember when I had always grown up and it always felt just chattery in my head, not specific. It almost felt like a radio not quite hitting the dial correctly, right? So it was just kind of fuzzy, staticky, but I knew it was voices, but I just thought it was me because that's just what I grew up with. Until finally, literally, it just became so loud in my head. And I was in my 20s. And I don't think I started learning Huna at that point, but maybe just. And I finally screamed in my head, stop it. I was just furious. I was just like, this is just too much. I was overwhelmed. And then it became absolutely silent. I mean, silent. And I'm like looking around and I was like flabbergasted. I go, okay, is that just me controlling these internal quote voices or this chattering? And I learned and realized that it was actually other entities that were attached to me or that I could hear. And I had dominion, I guess, over my body and what was here. And in Huna, they say the rule is one soul, one body. Anybody else you can kick out whenever you want. And everyone knows it, but they, you know, the more evil, angry, bad, I don't want to put that judgment side of things, they will try to convince you otherwise, but you have the right to your body as you see fit. Right. And anyway, so it was an astounding experience for me and a discovery of, wow, okay, it was, you know, and so now it's just me in my head. And if I invite other people or if I'm going to clear a house or a property, then I'll allow that in. Otherwise, it's quite quiet in here, which is really nice. And but it makes me wonder, honestly, how many people who are labeled as schizophrenic
Right.
or those levels that they're just really sensitive people and they have entity attachments to them. You could say entities for me, I use that term for, it's either a ghost of a person who hasn't passed over or another being out there that's never been a human or never been an animal or never been a tree or whatever. Um, you know, or a demon or whatever else is out there. That what if they're just really sensitive and they're just now just given pills to kind of quiet down? But what if you just cleared them and you could train them how to navigate them being sensitive? I think that would help, I think, thousands of people,
Absolutely.
honestly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. In shamanism, when the person has soul fragmentation, part of the soul is detached from the whole soul itself. And I would
Yes.
assume that those parts of the soul have a greater connection to the parts of hearing things or being in touch with things and having that sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of a person having a near death experience and their soul being completely knocked out of the body for a period of time, where they have that connection towards the sounds, the spirit, and whatever they come into contact with. As I just said, in shamanism, that soul is detached, and maybe you pick it up. And I know trauma for me in some cases, if the person did a reading, they would say, "Oh, I could see part of the soul detached," which would
Mm-hmm.
be, in terms of a medical condition, would be a detachment of a person's soul, or not a schizophrenia, but remnants of having those types of visions or hearing things, as you just mentioned. So
Yes.
I definitely understand that, and I think it comes in
Yes.
different ways. As you said, it came in through the sounds in your voice, and or it becomes like a detachment of being detached from reality, being able to pull away when things get too stressful. So yeah,
Yes.
so having the three different modalities of using the NLP, Family Constellations, and Huna, it gives like a whole scope or a general, not a general, it gives you a whole perspective on how to heal the soul of the person, or at least heal the different entities, parts, family, past lives, and everything else. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, maybe you could
Yeah.
just touch upon your book that you wrote, and you could
Yes.
just
So I wrote a book a few years ago. It's called Becoming Ridiculously Awesome. Who doesn't want that? And I wrote it because I realized that there was just so much information out there that needed to get to people in hopefully a very approachable way, such that it became a journey for the reader. So it touches upon my journey on me having premonitions when I was little and working through that, working through my trauma, and then going and learning about NLP and family constellations and Huna work and coming to a very big epiphany at the end that um, at the end of every chapter are exercises so you can really bring it home to yourself and become to be a little bit more objective about your experience. You know, that maybe it's malleable, that there's an experience you're having that maybe if you don't want it, well, maybe you don't have to have it. And if you don't want to have that, well, what would you like to have instead? And so it's a sharing my journey is there to help you on your journey so you can navigate and become a master of your own universe and to be able to find your whole pieces and bring them back to you and learn that you're not stuck where you are.
yeah.
And I think a lot of people are so stuck they just don't know where to go. And we'll go to temple and there are a lot of great things um, with religion. Absolutely. This is another aspect that directly heals the traumas in all the ways that we've had them. And when you talked about soul loss and soul fragmentation, I had an experience of when I was retrieving that, and when it was found, it was like, well, I don't want to be with you because you screwed up. I go,
Right.
well, I did only the best I could, and but then once it was brought back in, my body felt different. It felt heavier, more dense, and my voice changed.
Wow.
And I was really blown away. It was just like, it's a little deeper. Like it was more, there was a greater resonance. And, there's so much healing that pills will not do. There's going to an insane asylum or going on a yoga retreat, very good in some ways. But if you really want to heal yourself and be a complete, full, higher, connected with your highest self, navigating your world and getting what you want out of life, then these tools are really, really helpful and going to get you probably all the way. I've worked with so many clients where they're just changed people, and they go, oh wow, I don't need to think that way anymore, I don't need to feel that way anymore, and all those obstacles that they put there were gone.
Yeah. So let's leave on the note of maybe we can just help people with your suggestion and your insight of how people could better navigate now in these times as we move forward, as we're going forward.
Yes, I think not looking outside your purview so much and trying to react to what the rest of the world is doing. We're in a very reactive state all the time. And, oh, am I doing this right? Should I be doing this? And da da da. And it starts with you waking up and breathing consciously into your belly, relaxing yourself, creating intention for the day. That takes about 5 seconds. And then consciously putting your feet on the floor and walking, to get dressed. And it's making those conscious choices and being aware of what you're telling yourself and how you're telling yourself. And what you're doing is you're building your space and your domain and your world. That, ninjutsu, all the martial arts will talk about you creating your own space. Other people are just getting in the way, right?
Absolutely.
And so when you're focusing on your hands and your space and how you are creating, how you are meeting the world, and how you are creating your intentions, don't worry about anybody else. And the more you can focus on that and let other people do what they're doing without judgment, the more you do that every day, the less the fears will come up. That you won't need to, because the fear is reactivity. Right? The lack of confidence in yourself. But when you know who you are, then you can navigate to wherever you want to be.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you for joining me and offering your inspiration, your insight into life at this point, and how people can have the opportunity to investigate parts of themselves through these different modalities that you offer. So I want to thank you very much for joining me today and sharing the information with the audience. And I'll share all your information in the information below. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Adam.